Hello, my beautiful people, and welcome to another legendary episode. This is a continuation of my previous video, Chad of the West. If you haven't watched that video, I highly suggest that you do in order to understand this video better. It featured the legendary John Chad Marston and showed his journey to absolute perfection. In the previous episode, John had reached the top and was above and beyond everyone else, but in the end, all of his enemies had surrounded him and, even though he fought hard, he was outnumbered and outgunned. Today's episode will be about John's son, Jack. He had always wondered where his father had gone and missed him every day. His mother hated him and he felt so alone. He spent most of his days staring out onto the hills and hoping he'd see his father walk down to him, yet he never did. So, Jack decided to take matters into his own hands. This is Jack's journey on finding the truth about his father, and realizing what it meant to be a man, and a son. Hope you all enjoy. Ever since father left, life was different. I remember the day he left. He'd gone to the hills and never came back. Mother got all grumpy and hateful towards me because I reminded her of father. She believed that father had abandoned us and left off with another woman, but I never believed it. I knew my father. We were extremely close to each other. We used to go fishing every weekend and he'd tell me how he felt useless and didn't want me to feel that way, because he thought I was better than him and I could do more in life than he ever could. He told me it was okay to make bad decisions and mess up sometimes, but the important thing was to learn from them and be able to forgive yourself. He was my hero. I was done living with mother and I knew I had to go away and find father. I was almost certain I would find him. So, I sat while I waited in my room until everyone was asleep. I then went outside and got onto my little horse. Father had taught me how to ride. I galloped my horse outside the ranch and went to the nearby town to look for father. I knew the way because I used to go there with my parents when they went to get groceries. It was really close. All of a sudden it started raining. I needed shelter, and luckily I saw a wooden staircase and went under it for protection. I decided to sit there and wait for the morning as the night was scary and almost no one was outside. In the morning I was already feeling weak. So I stood near a newspaper boy and he told me some words of pure wisdom.
My brother would tell me the world was gonna change in the new century. Day would be night, the dead would rise, but it's just the same.
And I felt better, because he was right. It was all the same. The outside world was no different. It was actually worse than I had imagined it to be, so I went to the dock area to look at the open sea, but I met this couple and heard the woman crying because they had no children. They asked me who I was and I told them my name and how I was here to look for my father. After hearing my story, they asked me to be their son because they wanted to adopt me, and also felt like my life could be in danger if I kept roaming around all alone. They looked like good people, so I went with them, also because I didn't want to return to mother. 7 years had passed in the blink of an eye, and I was 15 years old now. Me and my foster father had gone hunting because we needed the meat. It was like our tradition. We would hunt our own food because it was the efficient way, and also because my foster parents were saving up to send me to a good college, so that I could become a scholar. They really wanted to give me a better life. I was happy, and they loved me. I saw this pair of buffaloes and decided to shoot one so that I could make my foster father proud. After I shot it, it went down but didn't die. So I ran up to it, to mercy kill because I hated when living beings suffered. Let alone, because of me. After reaching the buffalo, I thanked it for the sacrifice it had made to feed us and shot it in the head to end its suffering. I heard the sound of 2 gunshots from where my foster father was and I had a bad feeling. I immediately ran to check up on him and to my horror, he was gone. The horse was dead and I could see arrows impaled in it. I panicked and began looking for him but I couldn't find him. I returned home to my foster mother, and told her everything I had saw. She knew what had happened. He had a tussle with the Native American people a few weeks ago and she feared this would happen. She hugged me and told me we had to move away from this place because she was scared and didn't want to lose me too. Afterwards, we moved to the city of Saint Denis. Ten years later, I had finished my degree in law and I was a scholar. My foster mother had passed today, and I was feeling really low. The city felt cold and I felt empty. All I could think of was, how tragic it is when people leave. Then I started thinking about my father. He was always in the back of my mind. Even though I had loving foster parents, I still missed my real father and wanted to get some closure. Throughout the years I had heard several rumors and legends about how a man had gone to the top of the highest mountain. Many people had claimed to have seen him on his way and described him as a strong man with a scar on his face. I knew my father had a scar on his face, but the idea that the legendary guy everyone talks about was my father was very far-fetched. Although the people who claim to have seen the legend have mentioned seeing him the same year my father had left, I had a deep feeling inside me that maybe, somehow, that was my father. But my rational side kept telling me that it couldn't be. Since I already wanted to get away from this place and clear my head, I thought to myself, what is there to lose? I needed the trip away from this place anyway. So, I decided to head north towards the mountains. Little did I know, this trip would change everything. The next morning, I started making my way north. I had a strong horse named Snow. I knew he would be able to endure the harsh temperatures and the long, rough journey. I had taken my pistol with me, just in case I ran into any wild animals. I was good at shooting because while studying law, it was compulsory to be at least above average experience with firearms in order to finish the degree. It was primarily because then only could one apply to be posted as a sheriff or a peacekeeper. I had been using firearms to hunt since I was a teenager, so it was an instinct at this point. I had reached the north and was taking in the sights, while my eyes searched around the area, hoping to find any sign of my father. Although it was silly, but my heart kept wishing. Maybe, magically he'd just appear somewhere and I'd see him. I'd ask him why he abandoned me and just left. But, honestly, I just wanted to see him, once. After all, he was my father, and we were really close. All those accusations Mother had made were constantly shouting in my head. Part of me believed that he had abandoned me and Mother was right, and part of me believed that he couldn't do that to us. I kept going on the pathway and soon after I saw what looked like cabins out in the snow. I was curious to who lived there, and maybe they could give me the answers I needed about this legendary man. So I went there and dismounted Snow. I decided to go further on foot. As I was walking, I had a weird feeling about the place and found it eerily quiet. Then I saw what looked like human remains in the snow. As a scholar of the law, I had experience with inspecting and identifying human remains during the practical classes. There was also a body tied to logs near the cabin ahead, and, honestly, it was quite horrifying. I went into the cabin to search for clues about what had happened here. The interior looked like as if it had been abandoned since a very long time. There was also a bed in one room, and it was the only thing which was in a usable state. The cabin had nothing noteworthy inside, so I went back outside and was going to search the other cabins in hopes of finding a clue. I decided to search the small shed near the main cabin first, so I went inside and then, I saw what looked like writing on paper. I went to inspect what it said, and when I did, my heart sank. The writing was from a person who had been imprisoned in here. It mentioned how he was shot by some people, but he survived, so they imprisoned him and tortured him. They starved him and cut off thin slices of meat clean of his legs and offer it to him as food. It was all very disturbing and painful to read. The paper had blood over and under it, as if the person writing it was almost always bleeding. I sat down and began to read the rest of the writings, and to my utmost horror, the name written at the end of the writings was none other than my father's. All of these writings were from him. I began to cry as I read all the things he had written for me in the letter. He had mentioned how much he missed me and wanted to get back to me. How much he missed Mother and wanted to tell her that he loved her. My hands were shaking as I picked up the last page, and it gave me all the answers I needed. That day when he left, he didn't just abandon us because of any woman or cheap desire, neither because he was a coward. He left because he had borrowed money from a gang who lent cash to the needy and desperate, but they were just liars and deceivers, looking for an easy prey to threaten and rob. They had threatened of killing him in front of his family if father was unable to pay them back. The deadline was so short, there was no way he could have paid them back in time, but of course, he needed the money in order to bring food to the table and pay the tax for our property. The feeling of uselessness was because he felt like there was nothing he could do to protect us from this gang. That day, he was done feeling useless, so he left and went to the mountains in order to lead the gang away. Away from his family. Away from me. I was broken. My eyes were red and I pulled my hair as I cried my heart out and shouted, "Father." Then I turned the page over and saw a list of names. I clenched my fists in anger as I read every name, one by one. I wanted to avenge my father. I wanted to take down these men who had given him such a cruel fate. I wanted to make them feel the pain they had inflicted on father. It was the first time in my life I had ever wanted to inflict pain and suffering upon someone, and it felt more like a purpose, and less like a wish. I awoke to the sound of a gunshot. I grabbed a rifle I had found in this shed and I immediately went to the barn, hopped on snow and proceeded to ride in the direction from where the sound came from. As I got closer, I saw a camp and a lot of people around it. I took out my binoculars and saw what looked like bandits. Rage filled my mind, as I thought to myself that these might be the people responsible for my father's death. I couldn't think rationally anymore. All I wanted to do was to kill. So I went closer as I got behind cover and steadied my aim. Then I fired.